Coming up, Alyssa London previews her upcoming special on MSNBC called The Culture is Indigenous Women. Native folks hit the tennis court in the recent tournament by the North American Indian Tennis Association. And a mountain in Oregon has a new name. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Hopa. Thank you for joining us. We begin today in Montana with a new state law that better protects Native American children in the state. Governor Greg Gianforte signed the Montana Indian Child Welfare Act into law last week after it previously passed both chambers of the state's legislature. The act gives Native parents and families preference when it comes to fostering or adopting a Native child. It has been backed by many experts as the gold standard in child welfare policy. The federal version of ICWA is currently under review by the Supreme Court, and a decision is expected any day now. Montana follows in the footsteps of other states with ICWA laws on the books, including in Wyoming and North Dakota. This law was heavily celebrated and championed by Native leaders in the state. Moving to Oregon, ICT and Underscore News are reporting new details in the domestic violence case against a former WNBA star. According to a source familiar with the matter, Shoni Schimmel will plead guilty and be sentenced in the case stemming from her arrest in 2021. The Umatilla citizen is charged with felony assault and assault by strangulation. Those federal charges carry a maximum sentence of 15 years in prison, plus 3 years of supervised release and a $250,000 fine. The details of her alleged assault against her former partner are not included in court documents. Schimmel first caught the attention of the nation after she helped lead the University of Louisville to a NCAA championship and later played for several WNBA teams. Her trial has been rescheduled 4 times, and she initially pled not guilty to both charges. Any sentence Schimmel receives will likely hinge on the sealed details. She has no prior criminal history in federal court or in state courts in Oregon. Schimmel is set to appear in court on August 18th. Moving to Washington, D.C., a college has made a new change aimed to move away from harmful depictions. George Washington University has changed the name of its athletic teams from the Colonials to the Revolutionaries. The previous name was criticized for celebrating colonization, which still has present-day effects on Native Americans. Last year, GW announced it would retire its name and spent the last 12 months speaking with students, alumni, and faculty on new suggestions. While the nickname is changed, the school will continue to use its mascot, George Washington. GW is the latest stakeholder to change its name, following others like the Washington Commanders and the Cleveland Guardians. In the Black Hills, a gold mine wants to expand its operations in the area. The Coeur Wharf mine in South Dakota has requested permission from the state board to begin extractions on an additional 48 acres of land owned by the company. The mine has already been granted 4 expansion permits in its 40-year history, with the last occurring in 2011. The project has been repeatedly met with negative reactions from people in the area because it occupies land promised to area tribes by the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. If the expansion is approved, it is expected to extend the mine's life by only 1 to 3 years and will disturb an estimated 31.9 million tons of material. The state board is set to make a final decision in the next 2 months. In San Diego, a tribal nation is adding its name to the list of tribes who have ownership of a professional sports franchise. In mid-May, the Sequan Band of the Kumeyaay Nation announced it had reached a deal to become the partial owner of the city's new Major League Soccer team. The team, whose name hasn't been released, will start playing at Snapdragon Stadium in 2025. Chairman Cody Martinez celebrated the move. He said for the last 40 years, the tribe has supported professional sports teams in the area through sponsorships, but it can now sit at the, quote, ownership table. The MLS's new club is majority owned by British and Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Mansour. It was part of an estimated $500 million agreement, according to Yahoo Sports. The Mohegan tribe became the first tribal nation to own a professional sports team when it purchased the WNBA team, the Connecticut Sun, in 2003. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. The North American Indian Tennis Association hosted its championship tournament in Tulsa, Oklahoma over the weekend. The event brings more than 100 Native American players to the courts. Here to share more about the event is Jessica Redcorn, the tournament director. Hello to you, Jessica. Give us an overview of how big this tournament is.
Well, actually this year was our largest tournament registration turnout, not only with adults, but children as well, with our free youth kids clinic that we do every Sunday afternoon.
And who won the tournament this year?
Well, there's about 24 different brackets that are played in this tournament, anywhere from men's, women's, senior singles to mixed doubles, men's doubles, women's doubles, open singles. And then we go right on down the line from the adults to the youth. So, and then we have intermediate levels too for people that are wanting to learn how to play tennis and they want to be involved and that are Native American and registered in our tournament, but they're not quite at that level of real competitiveness because they're kind of beginning. So there's lots of different winners to each bracket.
That's a great segue into my next question, which is just which tribal nations people come from to compete in this tournament?
Well, this year specifically, there was around 23 different tribes that were represented throughout the nation. Anywhere from our local tribes here in Oklahoma, which we have 39 here in Oklahoma, to people coming from Minnesota and Phoenix and Florida and California. So amongst that, there was about 23 different tribes represented.
You know, we hear so often in Indian country that basketball is one of the most popular sports that exists, or other sports like football, but maybe talk about the camaraderie behind the sport like tennis.
Well, the camaraderie with our association it started back in 1976 with a small group of Native American tennis players that love the sport, and they happen to all be Native American. So throughout the years, people have turned this into kind of a family reunion. Sometimes we only get to see those people once a year. And they tend to stay in the same host hotel. This year, I got one right by the court, so it's very easy for the families to stay together and come out to the court, spend all day together, eat the food that we get brought in and sponsored from anywhere from breakfast snacks to lunch, and then our big banquet that we had on Saturday evening. So everyone is there on the courts and able to visit, share their stories with not only their tennis stories, but their family history, and meet all sorts of Native Americans that love the tennis sport from across the nation.
You mentioned earlier that there are initiatives to help young Native tennis players. Tell us about that.
Yes, definitely. We welcome kids that have never even played tennis before, but maybe one of their relatives does, or maybe they've seen it on TV and they want to learn. So we have a free kids clinic that is sponsored by the United States Tennis Association, and some grants that we use, and then some also private sponsorship for like the kids snacks. So what that entailed is that any Native American youth that wants to learn, they register for the free youth kids clinic, and we give them a free tennis tournament T-shirt, and they also get a brand new tennis racket that the United States Tennis Association provided for us through a grant.
That sounds like a perfect opportunity for Native youth. I'm really curious if you can maybe talk about the benefits to playing tennis. You mentioned that even elders participate in this.
Yes, absolutely. It's a sport that doesn't take, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a physical sport, but it's not a contact sport. So especially when you play doubles, you don't have to take up the whole court. You don't have to use, so much of your body when, even when you become a senior, you can still play that and not have to take a whole lot of steps in order to swing the racket. So, up to the top in shape, people that have, a lot of cardio, they stay healthy, they eat healthy. They get out there, and it's an outside sport, so it's great for your morale and just the physical aspect of tennis. It keeps you healthy, and we promote that throughout the Native American community with the youth and the adults and seniors to stay active in our association. It's just the camaraderie and the weekend together is just this wonderful experience.
Well, Jessica Redcorn, Tournament Director of the North American Indian Tennis Association, thank you.
Thank you.
Alyssa London wears many hats, including being the founder of Culture Story, which is a media company promoting cross-cultural awareness and showcases Indigenous culture. Last year, she became the first Native contributor for NBC News and MSNBC. Her most recent project is hosting an upcoming special on MSNBC called The Culture is Indigenous Women. ICT's Paris Wise spoke with Alyssa to learn more about the special.
Hi, Alyssa. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Paris. Happy to be here.
I have to say how excited I am for this special. I mean, you sat down with a dream team full of incredible Indigenous women. Can you tell us more about the special and who viewers will see?
I love talking about identity as a mixed-race Tlingit woman who is very, concerned about the next 7 generations of Indigenous identity, Indigenous futurism. I really wanted to get all of the women at the table's takes on what's the appropriate way to refer to Native people in our various communities, as I knew the audience is going to be mainstream America, and we don't often get to have them as our audience for Native topics. I wanted to debunk certain topics like blood quantum and help our audience understand why that might not be the most appropriate thing to ask, and how Native identity is more complex than that. Another topic that I felt was very important to speak about with a table of incredible Native women was missing and murdered Indigenous people. And so we touch on that. And then with having Crystal Echohawk and 2 other women, Amber and Jane, at the table, who are just such a force in Native Hollywood, then of course I had to talk about Native stereotypes and how those are perpetuated in the media, and also just get a sense of the work they're doing to try and increase Native representation in Hollywood. So those are the few of the topics. So I'm proud of those.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on that, because I'm sure a lot of people have never seen content like this on such a large scale in mainstream media. From your experience as a storyteller and a journalist, what impact do you see this special having?
The impact that I see the special having is greater dialogue within mainstream America about the fact that Natives still exist, or that we're still here, and hopefully to have their interest perked enough so that they will want to see more Indigenous content and be more curious about us, because I think that while the Crystal Echohawks of the world and some of the other women at the table, their work is so important on the Native side to state and point out through research, even like what Illuminative has created to show that there needs to be more Native content. But then we also need mainstream America to have a demand for it. And I really hope with the ratings of the show that then there will be a business case made, that people will watch content that is about Native Americans. And so the president of MSNBC, Rashida, and her executive team can then sit around and be like, okay, here's the budget. So hoping that we get to make more, not necessarily in this format, but just more Indigenous content.
Can you tell us what it was like working with the Suquamish tribe?
They were just wonderful hosts. They they just opened their community to us, and they had a salmon bake and a canoe landing ceremony, and they seemed very just happy to have us. And NBC even pointed out in our crew dinner after the filming was completed, like that night we all got together, and they're like, we'd never felt so welcome. And then I don't know if I said this out loud, but I thought it. I was like, well, welcome to Indian country. When you come on our lands, it's part of our culture to make you feel at home.
I'm sure we can't all wait to see these conversations that you had. Can you tell us a little bit about the conversations off camera, behind the scenes with the women?
Well, I really appreciated Janae Casanavoid and Amber Midthunder's friendship. I don't know if they knew each other before the show. They, like, after we wrapped, were like out in the grass, like doing a lot of TikToks. And that's when I realized I was just past their generation to like be as like good at TikTok as them. So I found that impressive, and I just thought their friendship to be really cute. Like Allie Young and I really vibed, and so we sat together, at the dinner. For me, it mostly was at that dinner. I didn't get to spend as much time with them before taping. The way that it was set up was they wanted my initial meeting with them to be like on camera, and so I like came down from this area of the venue that they had me at, where I had wanted to write thank you notes to all the women in the show, and I was doing that while they were also being delivered once I would finish them, and then that was like taped. And so then I met them. It was very quick and it was all filmed, and then they had Secretary Holland had a pre-taping of a message to us, and then we all stood and watched that. And then we were just on camera together like the whole time, other than that dinner afterwards. So I guess that's something that I would have liked more, was to get to have what they did, which was like more time to like hang out at the hotel. But that wasn't my role. So I thought if you ever get to interview any of them, I would love to know what their conversations were off camera.
Kind of on that, like, what hopes do you have for future storytellers to continue doing this work? I'm super curious, and whatever inspired you to become a storyteller and journalist, what it would have been like if you saw this kind of content, when you were younger, before choosing this career path.
I hope that Native journalists and storytellers who are coming up now will be able to see themselves in a role at NBC, ABC, any of the major mainstream cable news television stations that they may dream of. I think that there's also a lot of entrepreneurship that can take place in media, and I think we see that with the Native entrepreneurs who are in media on TikTok and Instagram. Native TikTok is really cool. So I don't think that the only way to be able to tell Native stories is by becoming an NBC contributor. But what it would have meant to me to see someone in this position when I was coming up would just, I think we all need to see like what's possible, and to see someone give us a little bit of a roadmap. And so maybe I would have had this dream. I actually didn't initially dream of becoming an NBC contributor because I just didn't know it was in the cards. So I just hope that it's causing people to expand their idea of what's possible for them if they are really committed to Native media and storytelling. I think that there is an increased interest in Native stories. And so let's all ride this wave together, because we need to have as many voices shining light in our community as possible to show we're still here.
Yes, make sure you tune in. The Culture is Indigenous Women airs on Sunday, June 4th on MSNBC, or you can stream on Peacock anytime after. Alyssa London, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Paris.
A peak in Western Oregon's Umpqua National Forest has a new name. On April 13th, the U.S. Board on Geographic Names approved the change to Mount Halo from its previous name, Swastika Mountain. The new title pays tribute to a Yoncalla Kalapuya tribal leader. Joining us today with the details is Brian Bull. He's a reporter with KLCC News in Eugene, Oregon. Welcome, Brian.
That's my way. How are you?
Give us some background on this change. Historically, we've known the swastika to be a symbol of evil, but I understand the history of the sign actually goes back hundreds of years earlier.
The swastika is a very complicated symbol. You find it in many, many cultures across the globe, including Native America, Hindu, Celtic cultures will oftentimes feature the swastika. And in some cultures, it represented a cyclone or a symbol of good luck. But of course, in the 1930s, the National Socialist Party of Germany, commonly known as the Nazi Party, with Adolf Hitler leading the charge, appropriated the swastika and created a symbol that has now become associated with anti-Semitism, white supremacy, and the Holocaust. So this particular mountain in Oregon, the Swastika Mountain, it's believed that some owners of a local cattle ranch very early on in the 1900s or 1800s branded cattle with the symbol. And so that particular use of the swastika became associated with this roughly 4,200-foot peak in Oregon.
We know that many geographic names that have used derogatory meanings, specifically referring to Native Americans, have been targeted by the Department of the Interior to be changed. Does this action fall under that?
This particular action was actually initiated on the local level. An 81-year-old woman by the name of Joyce McLean had heard of two teenagers who tried climbing the peak just, I believe, a year and a half ago, who were rescued. And after learning of the rescue and the name of the mountain, basically questioned why was it named Swastika Mountain, given its problematic association with recent history. And so she had proposed a new name for it, Umpqua Mountain, because it's in the Umpqua National Forest. That was later dropped. But another individual by the name of David G. Lewis, he's a member of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and is an anthropologist and ethnic studies professor at Oregon State University. He drew up a proposal for Mount Halo, which is based on Chief Halito, who is, as you mentioned earlier, is a leader of the Yoncalla Kalapuya tribe. And so he wrote to the Oregon Board of Geographic Names, I believe, and that was also approved just last month, in April, I should say, by the U.S. Board of Geographic Names.
And what has been the response from tribal leaders or just Native people in the area to this new name?
I believe the overall response has been positive. And reading some articles and comment sections, there are some people who felt bad that the swastika had to be dropped from the name because they still hold on to the pre-Nazi associations of good luck and good fortune, and reflecting, that it had other meanings. But it's so demonized now that I just think it's almost a losing argument. I will say that one point of contention that I had happened with some of the major media outlets reporting on this. I had written National Public Radio for an article they did. National Geographic had an article too, where they both omitted David G. Lewis's name from their coverage and seemed to give a lot of the credit to Joyce McLean, who is great because she raised the question in the first place. But when it came to doing the research and processing the paperwork and leading the charge on getting this name changed, David G. Lewis, again, a Native American scholar, has been dropped or overlooked in some of the coverage. And so I like to highlight the hard work that he put into it and the thought and meaning he put into this new name.
Switching gears, it's the unofficial start of the powwow season, and all across the country, drummers and singers are very excited to be back in the arena. What does that look like in Oregon?
It's looking pretty festive again, very lively. As you probably know, for the last three and a half years, a lot of powwows were dropped from the calendar because of COVID-19. And many states, including ours, had prohibitions on large mass gatherings. And Native American tribes in particular have been very, very careful to protect their most fragile populations, which include elders and the very, very young. And so with the pandemic receding and a lot of people dropping mandatory health requirements like face masks and social distancing, powwows are beginning to appear on the calendar again. And the most recent one that I caught word of was at Oregon State University on May 20th. They had to forego their powwow. They've not held one since 2019. It is the 44th annual Slatawa Ina powwow, which draws in a few hundred people every year. And they were just very excited to hit the dance floor and pound the drum and see the vendors out on the sidelines with their tables. And they also mentioned, one of the organizers said that they have now brought back the return of the powwow royalty program. And so it was just a very happy event. And
well, Brian Bull from KLCC News, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.